Hello. In this lecture, we'll be talking about some important assessment terms. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Hope Wilson. I have a PhD in educational psychology from the University of Connecticut. I have a master's degree in gifted education from Hardin-Simmons University. And so both my PhD and my master's degree focused on gifted education. So throughout this course, you'll see me talk a lot about gifted students, and that's my area of research. So I think that's a different perspective that I can bring to this course that you might not get from your other professors. I also have a master's of teaching from Austin College, and my bachelor's degree was in art. So I was an art teacher for 5 years, my K through 12 experience. So this is my family. I have 2 children. Keenan's 9 years old. He's in 4th grade at Chetts Creek Elementary, and my daughter's 16. She's a junior at Stanton College Preparatory High School. My husband John is a math teacher at Kernan Middle School, so you can see I'm deeply invested in the Duval County public school system. We moved to Jacksonville about 6 years ago. Prior to that, and prior to my doctoral program, I taught 4 years in public schools. I was a K through 5 art teacher. I also have lots of experience in higher education. I taught at Stephen F. Austin State University for 3 years. I've been at the University of North Florida for over 5 years. I've published 1 book, 4 book chapters, and over 15 research articles, mostly focusing on educational psychology and gifted education. So I'm really excited to get to know all of you in this class. Since I obviously can't talk to you right now through a one-way lecture, I'm looking forward to the discussion boards this week where you'll get to introduce yourselves and you'll get to know each other as well. So let's get started on talking about assessment. I want you to take a few minutes right now, pause the recording, and jot down a couple of reasons why you think we have assessment. What is the purpose of assessment? So pause your recording, jot down a couple of reasons about the purpose, the reasons why we assess students. Okay, so hopefully you wrote down a few answers, and now we'll talk about a couple of reasons that the literature really talks about the purpose of assessments, why you're taking this course, why we focus so much on assessments in schools. So the first one is that assessment should guide our instruction. That is definitely a buzzword that you're going to hear in our schools over and over again. Your administrators, your principals are going to say, assessment guides our instruction. And you're going to think, well, what does that mean? Well, we'll talk about it a lot this semester. But essentially what we're talking about is that the data that we get from assessments should guide what we do in our classrooms. So if we find out, oh, wow, our students are really having trouble with 2-digit addition, then we should be focusing more on that in our instruction. Right? In addition, if we know that 2-digit addition is going to be a big component of the final exam or the EOC or the FSA in our class, then we need to make sure that our instruction is helping guide students towards that final assessment. Assessments help us diagnose our students' strengths and weaknesses. So assessments should help us know what our students are good at so we can build on those strengths and where they need more help to build up those weaknesses. They can help us monitor student learning progress. So not only do they help us know what they can and can't do, they help us know where our students are going and how fast they're making progress in areas. At the end of the day, we have to assign grades to students. We are responsible for those report cards as teachers, and we need to know we have to put a grade down, and parents, teachers, students are all looking for us to have some backup for those grades. So assessments help us do that grading process, which I always say is my least favorite part of being a teacher, but it's the reality of the situation, right? It helps us as teachers be self-reflective. It helps us determine our instructional effectiveness. Through assessments, we can see, well, did that lesson work? Was I effective in teaching those concepts to my students? For some of our students, assessment is motivational. So how many of you guys would be looking at this lecture, would be doing this work if there wasn't going to be an assessment at the end, if you weren't going to get a grade, right? So we know that assessments help motivate our students to participate, to do the activities, to learn the material. When we talk about assessment, we can talk about I like to think of assessment in 3 different ways. We have assessment of learning, and that's summative assessment. That's our traditional assessment, right? That's the assessment we traditionally think of, our tests, our quizzes. It's assessment of what students have learned, right? We also have assessment for learning. So this is the type of assessment that helps us guide our instruction. It helps us think we're going to do this assessment to help us know what our students should learn or help us guide our instruction. So that's formative assessment, right? And all of you guys should be really familiar with this formative and summative assessments in your other previous classes, right? And then we have assessment as learning, and I'm really fond of thinking about how we can combine assessment and learning, assessment and instruction at the same time. So that's these performance assessments. So if you can think back to when you were in school and you might have done a project, and that's where, yeah, that project was an assessment tool for the teachers, but by doing that assessment, by doing that project, you are also learning. So it's an example of where a teacher was able to combine that performance, that assessment, and that instruction at the same time, which is really kind of cool if you think about it. So we have assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. That's another way to think about assessment. And then we're going to talk about these three terms: assessment, evaluation, and measurement. So what is the difference between these three terms? And I think it's important that as we move forward in this class and as we're really talking about these terms, that we're really specific about our vocabulary. And I want to make a small note that when we're using these terms, it's a little bit different than what the textbook is saying. So Popham's going to give you one kind of take on these terms, and I'm going to give you a different take. So assessment, measurement, and evaluation. I know we've all used these terms in our everyday speaking, but I want to be really specific about what we mean when we're talking about assessment, evaluation, and measurement. And note that if you see these terms on a quiz or a celebration of learning, note that I'm going by my definition and not the textbooks. So measurement really refers to counting. It refers to quantifying something. So if I'm talking about measurement, I'm talking about how do I put a number to a construct, a number to something that I'm talking about. So I could measure how many inches high a child can jump, how many spelling errors were in that essay, how many words long was that research paper, how many correct answers were in that math worksheet. You got 95% correct on that paper. I'm measuring your achievement. I'm putting a number, I'm quantifying something. We associate this with quantitative measurement in research. So measurement is really putting a number to something or counting something or quantifying something, which not all assessment is measurement, right? We're not always putting a number to something. We're not always measuring something. Assessment is really the broadest of these three terms. Assessment is really gauging performance based upon some set of criteria. I like to say that there's really nothing in your classroom that you're doing that isn't some sort of assessment. If I'm speaking right now and I'm looking out at my classroom, I'm looking at all of the faces around me and I'm thinking, okay, well, some of you are looking kind of bored, so I might need to add up some energy. Some of you are looking really confused, so I need to explain this concept more. Some of you are nodding like you understand, so you guys, I can move on to a new content. So I'm just doing this informal assessment even as I'm lecturing. So I'm doing assessment as I'm instructing. Of course, I'm giving quizzes and doing really formal assessments. So assessment's just gauging performance based upon a set of criteria, and it happens all the time. And then evaluation is where we place judgment on that work. So not all assessment is evaluation. I'm not always placing some sort of judgment on that work. But when I put a grade on it, if I say you're passing or failing, if I'm deciding who's going to be in which reading group based upon a set of criteria, then I'm evaluating. So evaluation is really associated with that more formal assessments. So another way we can think about assessment is thinking about evaluation or measurement in that context. So really be specific when you're talking about your terms, if you're talking about evaluation or measurement or assessment more generally. So thank you for this lecture, and you can move on to the next page in our module.